Back in 2004, after the events of Superman Volume 2, Issue 200, our titular hero, Superman, has disappeared. A massive time storm is raging around Metropolis, supposedly caused by the B-12 technology that Brainiac used to remake the city. Established heroes like John Henry Irons, his niece Steel, Superboy, and the former villainous android the Eradicator have all teamed up to find a solution. What they weren't counting on was the addition of a surprise guest, Mr. Majestic, from the Wildstorm universe. Instantly understanding that their attempts to fix this problem are only going to make things worse, you idiots, Mr. Majestic warned them to change course. Eradicator would not, and sent Majestic into the Phantom Zone. Confident that they could now act unimpeded, our super dudes headed out to blow up the time storm with the CVE, or Charged Vacuum Embointment. Somehow, someway, Majestic broke free of the Phantom Zone. Can he now save Metropolis in Superman's stead? Can he find a way back to his natural reality? My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 33.4 of Mr. Majestic, Strange New Visitor. In the final issue of our trilogy, Superman Volume 2, Issue 201, we open with Majestic defending himself from the various defenses and defenders of Star Labs. It turns out that Lois Lane let him out of the Phantom Zone because she honestly thinks that he can help with the situation. John Henry Irons attempts to apologize for imprisoning him, maybe they overreacted, and Majestic essentially tells him off. There is no time left for them to discuss this course of action. Their woeful, idiotic attempts at science are going to doom the very city that they're trying to save. The collapse that Irons is predicting is going to be set off by the very device that they hope to use to stop it. Miss Lane, at least, trusts him enough not to allow that to happen. And then Majestic flies off. He quickly catches up to the supergroup and zaps Steel. Superboy is distracted by saving her, Eradicator chucks the CVE into the storm, and then he tussles with Majestic for a few pages. Mr. Majestic gets the upper hand long enough to glare at the CVE, and then he hits it with some heat vision. It explodes. At Star Labs, Irons doubles over his computer station. Oh, that was their last best hope, and he destroyed it. While Irons tries to figure out something that they can do to stop this storm, Lois runs outside. She beats herself up over trusting Majestic. He just reminded her so much of Clark that she thought that he could be trusted. But she was wrong. If only you were here, she thinks. And then a blinding light fills her vision. We see several pages of buildings that appear to be caught up in explosions. Lois is suddenly whisked into the air by Majestic. Tears in her eyes, she is horrified at what her city has become. But Majestic tells her to calm down. Trust him for a few minutes more. And look. Lois does. And Metropolis is fine. The setting sun pours over the city, restored to its appearance before the B-Tech remade the city. At Star Labs, Irons is happily amazed that Majestic was right. Steel and Superboy return, chagrined but glad that things turned out okay. Eradicator is a bit unnerved, though. Something about Majestic is off. And if he is right about the threat Majestic poses, then he will eradicate him. Back with Lois and Majestic, he gently floats down to a nearby rooftop. The storm was the time stream righting itself, he explains, ridding the present of the infection that was the extratemporal infection that was the B-Tech. It was a violent but natural process that they needed to let take its course. He compliments Metropolis as far as cities go, and then goes to leave. Lois asks where he's going to go now. What's he going to do? Once I've found a way, I'm going home, he says. But until then, if you need me, just look up in the sky. She watches him leave and whispers, Majestic. Then we get one final page of something having followed Majestic through the temporal storm here, but that's a threat for another day and our follow-up miniseries. So clearly, I dug this. One of the things that I love the most about this story arc is that it is totally handled by the same creative team. That isn't an easy feat in the world of comic book publishing. All 3 of these issues were released in March of 2004 with the same creative team, on time. Karl Kerschel kicked ass with these books. Having one artist do all of the interiors allowed the story to maintain its specific tone and visual language, despite the fact that the story ran through 3 different comic books. Kerschel's artwork is fairly realistic and grounded throughout. The realism that he brings helps to add tension and drama to the overall tone of the story. Considering how the thread of this comic is so hard to picture visually, you really need that consistency for the rest of it. Like, this is a time storm. What does that look like? If you were sat down and charged with drawing Metropolis, a city in a time storm, how do you draw that? For the most part, we get panels of strong winds and the occasional lightning bolt. The coloring by the Horiers helps with grounded grays and blues during the storm's buildup, a threatening final boss color of red during Majestic and Eradicator's final confrontation, and then brilliant golds and browns for the restoration of classic Metropolis. His Majestic, Kerschel's Majestic, still looks great, by the way. He is muscular, imposing, and emotionally distant. He does bring to mind McGuinness's Majestic without copying his style. He is big and bulky as opposed to Canete's thinner, longer version, but like I said, he's a good middle ground for me. I don't know if artist Karl Kerschel was responsible for designing Eradicator's costume here or not, but it is very different from the one that he wore originally when he first debuted, and I love it. The red and black perfectly fits with his more brutal, more pragmatic ways of saving the day. The fact that his face is covered makes him feel even more threatening, and the almost jacket thing that he wears evokes the idea of Superman's cape without it being a cape. He clearly feels like a less than good version of Superman without necessarily looking like an evil version of Superman. It's great. It also contrasts and complements with Majestic well, because both of them are Superman inspired, but they aren't Superman in their behavior. They're both very pragmatic. They're a bit more emotionally detached from humanity, and they won't let anyone stand in the way of doing what they think is right. Majestic's costume is red and white, Eradicator is red and black. This kind of shorthands their nature visually for us. Majestic might be pragmatic, but he's ultimately a good guy. Eradicator might be pragmatic, but he is historically a bad guy. He's always going to have that "when might he go bad again" energy hanging over his story, and this look conveys it perfectly to me. I love it. Perhaps my favorite thing about this story, though, are the covers. I adore a good gimmick cover, and by Stan Lee's sunglasses. These are great. First off, they're by Ed McGuinness. Great way to start, love his stuff. Secondly, Action Comics 811 features a big shot of Superman fading away as a golden energy moves up the buildings of Metropolis behind him. Hello, Co. A cover blurb promises us a world without Superman, so we know that he's going away, but not how. It's bright, it's colorful, it's just enough of a tease to leave me wondering, what will this comic be without Superman? What becomes of Metropolis if there was never a Superman? That's all great visual shorthand, I love it. Adventures then repeats the same basic image, but with Majestic replacing Superman. He stands in almost exactly the same pose, but fully realized. Where Superman was fading out, Majestic has faded in, and Metropolis is restored to its classic version behind him. The blurb now reads, "A world with Mr. Majestic," and I love it. Action Comics is mostly all blue as well, which matches Superman's costume and the high-tech futuristic vision of Metropolis covered with B-Tech. The Adventures cover is golden brown, matching the red of Majestic incredibly well, but also highlighting the change to Metropolis. These two covers perfectly tell us the story of this arc in visual shorthand. Superman goes away, Majestic takes his place, Metropolis is restored to its classic look. Just two images to convey so much information, and they do it perfectly. And it's not just a gimmick cover, but a paired cover. I love it. God, I love these things. And then finally, Superman 201 is actually an homage to Action Comics issue 1. Rather than Superman lifting a car over his head, now it's Majestic, either saving or attacking Superboy, depending on your perspective. Even the graphic design of the title font is done to mimic that Action Comics cover, further adding to the look. Excuse me. That's awesome. That's amazing. I would have bought these 3 comics for the covers alone, just because I think that this kind of thing is fun as heck. So cool. As a Mr. Majestic story, I think that this works pretty well. The pacing is a bit slow, but I'm kind of used to the done-in-one style of storytelling that authors Casey and Holguin were doing on Majestic's ongoing series, so I think that transition can be forgiven. Clearly, we have no follow-up to Majestic's ascension to godhood in this story, so I don't know if that was something that was concluded over in the Wildstorm universe, or if the authors are just ignoring it. Authors Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning are generally big fans of continuity in their writing. I've read and love all of the stuff that they wrote over at Marvel in the meantime, most especially their runs on Nova and Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that if the God thing was still important, then they would have honored it. But I don't know. The internet has provided me no trail to follow after the end of Majestic's first ongoing series, but here, so maybe they just skipped it, and if they did, I gotta say, good for them. I'm fine with Majestic this way. I don't know what you do with Cosmic Majestic, so I'm okay with Superman rip-off Majestic. I also love the way that Majestic behaved here. He felt very in character, calm, controlled, knowledgeable, maybe, definitely, a little bit full of himself. There is an air of authority that he commands and expects to be respected, even if you don't know who he is. It's a great setup for more stories, placing Majestic in a very interesting spot. His search for a way home will be complicated by protecting Metropolis and the rest of the DC universe. He won't be able to rely on native scientists because he clearly knows more than they do, and he doesn't know a way home, so it's doubtful that they'll come up with a solution. Clearly, the Eradicator doesn't trust him, and we've got the mystery threat at the end of the issue lurking around too. I like all of this, and I want to see more. Thankfully, we've got more coming up. Now, as a Superman story, I don't know how I feel about this. While the first issue does a great job of recapping who Superman is and all of that, it doesn't do a modern recap of what has been going on at all. Going into these issues, I was totally lost as to why Superman was missing. I skim-read through Superman Volume 2, Issue 200 to give myself the basics so I could let y'all know anything you needed to know. And oh boy, is it a comic book story, and I mean that in a bad way. It's complicated, it's messy, it's got time travel and dystopian futures and a brainwashed Supergirl who goes back in time to save the day and erase herself from existence in order to save the day, and just... wow. No wonder they don't mention any of that stuff here. I think that Strange New Visitor can be picked up and read with relative ease, while the rest of the story that preceded it is a big knot of storytelling, and not in a way that I think is compelling. I really like complicated comic book stories. I've been reading Grant Morrison's JLA in the background, and that is a comic book that touches on the continuity of all of its cast, because he uses the Big Seven. They use the Big Seven, I'm sorry. And Morrison will comment on, like, oh, the Flash can't do this mission because he's injured. He got injured over in his own ongoing series. And that makes me go, oh, how did he get injured? What's going on? Why is he injured? Oh, it's a shame that Wonder Woman can't come along because she's dead. What do you mean Wonder Woman's dead? What happened to Wonder Woman? Well, you would have to be reading Wonder Woman's ongoing series, wouldn't you? Even currently, with some of DC books, I've been reading the current Superman book by Joshua Williamson, and that has had nods recently to Justice League Unlimited, and that's been great. I love when comic books nod to each other and play off of each other and tell a complicated story. But there is something to be said for that story needing to be something that can be followed. And if I were reading Superman, this weird veer into Mr. Majestic would be incredibly jarring. I'm trying to think of a good modern day comparison. It would be like reading modern day Superman and having Invincible suddenly guest star in the book for 3 issues. Like, why would you? What's going on? Why is this a thing? What are you doing? And then to go back into a Superman story after that, I think would be really fun. It helps that I do have a curiosity about the Wildstorm universe, obviously, or I wouldn't be buying some of their books. I don't know how a DC person would feel about this. That's intriguing. Like I said, I think A Strange New Visitor stands pretty well on its own as a Majestic, like, hidden miniseries kind of thing. And if I remember correctly, these 3 issues are collected in the Mr. Majestic Strange New Visitor trade paperback, so they are kind of like a 7-issue story arc, almost. But like I said, I go back and forth on this. On the one hand, I had a good time with it, and I really liked it as a Majestic reader. As a Superman reader, I think this would be really weird. It does nothing, like, there's not even a hint of, like, Superman goes missing at the end of issue 200. There is no tease. There is no setup. There is no nod to Superman's fate. As far as we know, Superman's goddamn gone. And I think that's a little bit weird. And we're going to come back to that. But let's finish talking about these comics first. Lois is incredibly well written here. And as I said before, I think that the issue that focused on her, our first issue, is great. Watching her interact with Majestic is actually really cute, in that she clearly gets him in a way that no one else does, right? Majestic seems to appreciate her as well, telling her that Superman is lucky to have her affection. That is super cute, especially from a guy like Majestic who isn't really concerned about people's emotions and well-being. The fact that he can look at Lois and be like, I get it. I see why Superman would be with you. I think that's really great. My only major complaint otherwise is the scene where Majestic gets released from the Phantom Zone at the end of the last issue and the beginning of the 3rd issue. Because we aren't shown any sign that he's being released by Lois Lane, right? He gets put in the Phantom Zone, and then on the next page, he's out and he's pissed. And for a moment, I honestly thought that he just broke free of the Phantom Zone on his own, like through sheer force of will. And I got momentarily really impressed. Superman can punch through time, after all. Why can't Majestic punch through dimensions? But then John Henry Irons is like, Lois, you let him out, right? And I was like, oh. Yeah, that was poorly conveyed by the artwork in the name of some really weak drama. Huh. But the thread of this story was very Majestic coded. You know, you've got this big, ridiculous sci-fi time storm that threatens to collapse all of reality. There are 3 super beings standing in Majestic's way to keep him from saving the day. Yeah, I can totally see that happening. This fits right in with the vibes of Mr. Majestic's ongoing series. I like Kerschel's artwork here. I love the Horie's coloring. And I think that Abnett and Lanning do a good job overall with this. If I remember correctly, they will continue to be the main writers for Mr. Majestic in the future. And this is a good setup for their stuff. Lois was great. Majestic was solid. Eradicator was a fun antagonist. He's just a goddamn hater, and I kind of love it. And the setup here for Majestic stories moving forward works for the most part. The only odd thing about this story is Majestic no longer being a cosmic god, but as we've covered, I didn't like that story anyway, so I'm kind of fine if we all just ignore it and move on with our lives. Instead, let's just focus on Majestic taking over for Superman and see where that takes us. Next week is actually going to take us into a Majestic miniseries. Superman returns to Metropolis, and he needs to have a little chat with the substitute has been watching over his city in ways that maybe he doesn't quite like. Then, a deadly threat has followed Majestic from the Wildstorm universe to the DC universe, and is on the hunt. Join me in some amount of time for Comic Book Breakdown episode 33.5 of Mr. Majestic, Grounded. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.